Welcome back to the show. Of course, David Scales here for Surf Splendor. Adam Warden of AJW is our guest today. This will be a two-parter, actually. We recorded for the allotted 90 minutes, and it turns out that we only got up to, I think, age 19 in his chronology. So we have lots more ground to cover. He is not only a great storyteller, but what I love about Adam is that his entire journey was just motivated by wanting to surf great waves. So he learned a craft of board building, every step of it, and then went to surf meccas around the world and just worked in factories, often for a very, very modest wage. So just kind of barely getting by, living in cars, sleeping on people's couches, and all in an effort just to surf the great waves on the planet. So I hope that you enjoy this conversation. I know you will, in fact. And to make it better, we're giving away an AJW surfboard this month. We do these giveaways as a thank you to our podcast supporters. So you could set up support on Surf Splendor Podcast for $5 a month. It is the founding, kind of the foundation, the building blocks of the podcast. We don't paywall any content. Everything is available for free. But just as a thank you to our supporters, we like to shine a light on board builders and then give away boards to listeners. So the model that we're going to be giving away with AJW, actually, we won't discuss it this week. You'll hear more about it next week. But it is an 80s kind of modernized hybrid. So fuller volume, shortboard, super rippable, full volume up front, easy paddling, and then kind of narrowed in the back with a little bit more modernization in the back, so it's more rippable, but easy to catch waves on, and it's called Back to the Future. So you can check that out on surfsplendorpodcast.com or, of course, on AJW's Instagram account. And then, of course, this is all made possible through support from realwatersports.com, Veyer Watches, and Rourke.com. Real Water Sports actually carries AJW surfboards, so if you don't win ours, or if you just don't want to wait to find out if you win ours, go and get it from realwatersports.com. They will ship it to you to your door anywhere in the world for one low flat fee. They are based in North Carolina, but they'll get it to you anywhere. And in fact, AJW is an East Coaster he was originally from Virginia Beach, so that's where that connection developed. And then, of course, Veyer Watches. They actually give you 2 straps with every watch purchase, so check this out. This is the leather strap on the field watch that I got from Veyer. I am, of course, wearing the rubber strap on my solar-powered dive watch. And then here's 3 different colors of NATO straps. So I bought 2 watches, and I've got actually 5 straps. They gave me 4. I bought a 5th one. Just because I wanted a different color. But incredible deal. The watches are super durable, well made, assembled in the USA, waterproof guaranteed. So, of course, they're ready for the ocean. So go to VeyerWatches.com. And then, of course, Rourke.com for clothing and gear consideration. I love the gear. You know, I'm raising a 2-year-old. I spend time on the road. It's incredibly durable, rip-stop material on the pants, so you kind of just dust it off. I often actually don't wash the pants, in fact, and they're still functional, durable, not stinky the next day, but stylish enough to wear out. So you can see from this t-shirt, beautiful cut, beautiful fit. In fact, my wife loves Rourke even as much as I do, so I think that says a lot. But go to Rourke.com. We'll save you 15% with our promo code. It is Splendor15. Splendor15, 15% off anytime. So not a one-time purchase, no limited time. So go and get that, Rourke.com. Thank you all. Let me make sure I covered everything on my notes. I think so. My name is David Scales for Surf Splendor, and I hope that you enjoy this episode, part 1 of 2, with Adam Warden of AJW Surfboards. Enjoy.
Surf Splendor.
The key is don't put all your eggs. The best advice I got.
That is the key.
Because I wanted to make surfboards my whole life. It wasn't even surfboards. I wanted to travel the world my whole life. And I became good friends with Gary Linden. And I randomly met Gary in Ecuador, believe it, of all places. And I was handshaping like, that's another story we can get into later. But I got invited to Ecuador to handshape like 60 boards in like a short amount of time. And I was young. And the place I was staying to go surf was randomly Gary Linden was staying at. And it was like, I never met him at all, met his name, knew his name, obviously.
Yeah.
And he was talking to me. He's like, kid, you really want to keep shaping forever? Don't put your eggs in surfboards. I'm like, well, what do you mean? I don't get that. You know, and he's like, you can make some money. And he was a little more lucrative back then. And he was like, you can make some money making surfboards, no doubt about it. But make sure you put it into something else. Don't just roll it all right back into surfboards. You do that, you're going to get wrecked every time the cycle turns around. Because it is a cycle, you know? And right now, COVID was a peak.
Yeah.
You know, and now this year, you know, you got to ride it out. But yeah, don't put all your eggs in just the podcast game, and spread it out, diversify. You know,
I agree. What was he talking about, or did he recommend where you would put that money? Back into.
I think he was starting the Big Wave World Tour then, and believe it or not, he's got a crazy story too. You should interview him. He sailed I don't know what age he was at, and I don't know Gary's that well, but we are buddies. I think he was in Europe, and he got on a sailboat and tried to sail back to the States or somewhere, and he ended up sailing to Brazil. I think they got stuck in the doldrums for like a month or something crazy, like almost died kind of crap, and he ended up in Brazil, like, I don't know what the story is. You gotta have to ask him, obviously, but he ended up in Brazil, I think in the early 80s at some point, and maybe met his wife there or something, and they were trying to get back to California or driving back to California, and they had a baby in Ecuador. Like his daughter was born in Ecuador. My mother's born in Ecuador, so I have connection over there. And he was passing through, and his daughter, I don't know what age she was at the time. She's older now. She was getting Ecuador citizenship or something like that. And
Interesting.
I don't know that's any of our business to be discussing that, obviously, but that he was there at the time doing that, and I was like, he's like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, I'm actually shaping boards. He's like, how are you in Ecuador shaping boards? You know,
I was wondering that too when you mentioned it earlier. Because
Surfer Magazine.
Oh,
remember all those like board forums and all those things?
yeah.
And I think this was like right when not the internet started, but like we had a website pretty early. I had a website pretty early on, like a blog or something, and I think I put some like information, like, you know, I don't know, my family, you know, I'm half Ecuadorian basically. Something I put on Ecuador, and then this guy contacted us through Surfer Magazine and was like, hey, U.S. Blanks shipped us, I think it was like a 40-foot container, and we got all these blanks, and we thought it was only going to be like 40 blanks, and we got way more than we need, and I need help shaping these things. And so he flew me down, and I did 60 boards in like a short amount of time.
So they have a board building community down there already?
There wasn't really. This was a balsa board guy. He was a balsa blank distributor, and that was the connection, how Gary was connected with them.
Gotcha.
Super weird.
Yeah.
But I traveled a lot at a younger age, like solo.
I'm very interested to hear all about it.
Yeah.
So two things I want to hear about is stories from your travels, but also the economics of how the economics have changed since you first got involved for board building. Let's back all the way up to where'd you grow up? How'd you discover surfing? Okay,
so I was born in Virginia, and basically, I'm blanking out here. I was born in Virginia. I had an older brother who's 5 years older than me. And, you know, any kid, you're chasing your brother constantly or trying to keep up with him. He got into surfing. I got into boogie boarding or whatever. We would go to the beach, you know, all the time. And, at some point in time, I don't know how old he was, but I was pretty young, and I really wanted to get a surfboard and get into it. And then he started surfing, and I started getting his hand-me-downs. And couldn't really figure them out at the time. You know, I was pretty young. And eventually one Christmas, I remember he got a brand new surfboard. And I remember thinking like, wow, that's so cool, you know? And I remember talking to my dad and saying, hey, like, I want to get a surfboard too. Like, yeah, you just got one too. We're going to give you his old hand-me-down. And I remember being like, just like kind of chaffed about it, you know, little brother. And I mean, I was probably 10 or something,
Yeah.
And so eventually I got a used board, and it was actually interesting, from a local shaper who had it was Ultralight Surfboards was the name of it.
Okay.
Robert Camp was the name, but he didn't shape the board. It was actually shaped by this Puerto Rican guy named Shea Morales, who later on I'm actually good friends with him now.
Yeah.
We've actually shaped together a bunch. So, and my dad was like, I was like, I want to get a new board. He's like, yeah, well, you better start cutting the grass a lot more or something. You know, when you get older, one day you can get one. And I was like, well, it's not fair. You got my brother a board, and, you know, how come I got to get this used one, you know? And he's like, well, why don't you make one? You want a new board? Figure it out. I don't know. That's how life works, you know? Like, if you don't have the money for something, figure out how to do it yourself then. And originally, I went to Home Depot or Lowe's and got wall insulation, you know, that like blue 1-inch just wall insulation foam. I think it was called like R2. And I grabbed a bunch of that, took a ton of Elmer's glue, glued it all together, and I didn't know board. And I was like, how am I going to get the stringer in it? So I cut the thing in half, and then I like wood glued, made my own blank.
Crazy.
And I was like 12, maybe about to be 13. And I remember like outside, there's just blue styrofoam dust going everywhere. And I had no idea about epoxy resin, right? So I go down to I live close. There's a big, you've heard of wave riding vehicles?
Of course.
They're, 50 years in business and largest manufacturer on the East Coast. They're in the Outer Banks, North Carolina, but they have a surf shop kind of close to where we grew up at.
Virginia Beach?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I went there, and they sold me a gallon of resin, and I was all excited. So I tried putting a little bit on, and then like the foam started eating away because it wasn't epoxy resin. So the poly resin was eating the whatever material that was. I'm like, what the heck? It's smoking, And I didn't know you could just buy blanks. So I remember it was so funny. My mom's like, I think you're doing it all wrong. I think the surfboards are like dipped in a big bucket because they look all super clean. There's no like, you're doing something wrong. I don't know what it is. And this was probably 96. Okay. And 96 on the East Coast, there's only so many guys who are willing to help some kid anywhere in the world you go, and I discovered surfboard blanks. So like maybe a year passed, and when I was 13, I was like, I just dead like a full year. I got to get a new surfboard. I got to get a new surfboard. That last thing was a waste of my time. I wasted all my lawnmower and money, and my dad was paying me 15 or 20 bucks to like be his landscaper slave. And so I ended up finding out you could buy a Clark foam blank. So I went to WRV and I bought one. And at the time that was when they had the 6.1R, the 6.5R. Dude, those low tolerance, they were like done.
Rusty design.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I ended up getting a Clark foam. And at the time I didn't have a car. So I was like, our warehouse is down in the Outer Banks, which is like an hour and a half away. But I was like, I can't get down there. Freaking, my old man won't take me down there. I got to figure it out. And then I somehow talked to them, and they gave me a Clark foam catalog. And I found out that I could order directly from Clark foam. So like at a really pretty early age, I was like, blanks are only like 40 bucks. Like that wall insulation I bought at Home Depot ended up to be 40 bucks, and it already has the wooden stringer. This is like too easy. So I eventually got a Clark foam blank, and it took a week. I didn't have a planer. I didn't have any tools. I think it was a metal file originally, it was like shaved, almost like a Surform type of thing. Didn't have a Surform though, and I had like a orbital sander, and it took a week whittling this thing away. It's actually in my shed over here. You can check it out.
Really?
Yeah. And it's still happened to this day.
Wow.
And I've surfed it for a while. So I make this board, and then I went to a local factory. There was another factory there called Season Surfboards, and they had been around for a while and had a bunch of traveling shapers coming throughout it, and they would sell me cloth. So I was like, dude, I could buy. I talked my brother to drive me down there when he got a little older, and then got all this cloth, resin, had like an old little shed at our house, and so they told me, Well, you mix up your resin, put in 12 cc's of catalyst, mix it all up, boom, you get it to go. No, and I never watched them though. They just told me, in person. So there's a guy named Steve Worrell. He's a character. If he ever hears this, he'll laugh. Yeah, I owe Steve Worrell a lot of credit. He's definitely a angry glasser, but he's a good guy, and he looked out for me definitely. So, anyways, they're like, "Look, kid, you're gonna go mess this up. Just pay us and make the thing." No. I'm not. You guys are gonna rip me off. I'm gonna do it myself. So I went home, zero experience, and my dad's like, "You need to go to the library." It wasn't the internet, or it wasn't really a thing yet that I knew about. And he's like, "Go to the library. There's got to be books on how to do this." So I go to the library. I'm like looking around, and there was an old 70s book on windsurfboards called, I believe it was called just Surfboard or Windsurfboard. And it was how to shape and how to do all this stuff. It was actually a really good book. I'm sure a lot of board builders have read this at some point. And so I go home, I read the book, I cut out the cloth, I'm ready to go. I don't even think I had a mask or nothing, I'm 13 years old. I mix up 12 cc's, I put the bucket there, I get my rubber gloves on, and I'm like, okay, this is cool. I didn't have a logo or nothing like that. And I'm like, okay, I think I'm ready to start, Probably 5 minutes have gone by already. Haven't even poured the first thing of resin. It's already mixed up. So I start pouring it. I got my little squeegee. I'm by myself. I think it was nighttime too. It was late at night. And I'm going here, and all of a sudden I'm like, dude, this thing's getting hot. Oh, is that correct? I had zero clue. It started smoking. I'm pouring on there, and the bucket just starts smoking before I haven't even done the laps yet. And I'm like, holy crap, it's going off. I don't know what's going to happen. And it starts to gel on me. And I think I just started getting one rail saturated. I just totally blew it. And so I'm freaking out. This is all my savings,
Yeah.
And so I get in here, and I'm like, abort. So I pull all the glass off. I'm squeegeeing the extra gel off this blank. I'm just furious. The next day I call the guy up, the glasser, who told me 12 cc's, and he's like, dude, you got to move fairly quickly. And I'm like, well, what the heck? He's, what you screwed me, man. I almost ruined it. Now I got to buy more cloth, do the whole thing over. And I think I did half that the next time, and then it took forever to go off. But I ended up glassing my first board, and there were glass on fins. This was before I think FCS was just coming out in Australia, but it hadn't really hit the States, or at least not on the East Coast. So I'm over here trying to mess with the fin roving, trying to learn how to, my first board, I was 100% on my own, shaped on my own, even made my own blank before that, glassed it, glass on fins, and I didn't know boards needed to be sanded. That's how green I was, zero idea. And then I just remember being yeah, your shape looked pretty good, but you're, I don't know why, but I think you got to figure out how, maybe they're sprayed on. That's what me and my brother were at, trying to figure this out. Nobody told me boards were sanded. So I'm I just don't know how they have the tape line on the outs. And everybody was all my friends were dogging me on my first board because it was never sanded. And I'm out there and I was surfing the thing, it was a piece of garbage,
But when you're that young, you probably weren't that good. You just need something that floated that would go straight to the beach, right?
Yeah, whatever. It was, I was stoked. I was stoked.
Yeah. There's no chance the fins are in the right place, any of it.
You can check the board out. It's fairly okay. So then I was you know what? That cost about $90. You were talking about the economics of it. It cost $90 to make a surfboard back then. And I was mowing lawns for my, whatever, my neighbors or something, using my dad's lawnmower, trying to save up money to buy these. And I'm okay, I think if I do a longboard, I could make some money and sell it. Because they're expensive at the surf shop, And surfboards at that time, I want to say you could get a board for $350 maybe in a local surf shop, So I'm okay, these guys are spending $90 and they're making $280. They're killing it. 13-year-old kid. So I did a second board. I got to figure out the glassing thing though. So I did a second board. It was a little bit better. I still didn't know boards needed to be sanded. I got the glass-ons on, figured that out a little better. I went to the factory and they let me watch. So that was huge learning curve.
Totally.
Huge learning curve. Figured out the catalyst.
At WRV?
No, this was at Season Surfboards.
Gotcha.
WRV was an hour and a half away.
Gotcha.
So I figured that out. And then that board was same as my first one. It wasn't sanded. Got the glass-ons a little better. Got the hot coat a little better. And then my third board, finally my brother was like, all right, I'll come up with $100. You make me one. So that was like my first real customer was my brother. And I mean, yeah, that was a big deal. I think by then I was probably 14 maybe. You know, it took me a year to get and I got figured that out. By then it was like, okay, boards are sanded, everything. And I was like, I'm figuring this out. And he paid for it. Like, this is awesome. My fourth one, and then that's when I discovered, like, I needed like 10 of them. Then, like, just to go through them. But I need the money. I don't have the money for it because I was a little kid. And my parents weren't helping out at all with it. Like, they were like, whatever. I don't know what Adam's doing out there in the shed, but whatever. Like, just clean up your mess, you know? Mm-hmm. And I don't know why, but everybody was, like, telling me that the glass jobs were, like, dipped into a bucket of resin or sprayed. And I just couldn't figure out that boards were sanded. And I didn't realize how important sanding was. And so I was like, man, these glassers are so good, you know? And so eventually I figured out boards need to be sanded. And I want to say like my fourth or fifth board, I remember specifically because it had this like green airbrush. And I don't know how or why, but like somebody told me, I think it was like my mom or sister. I had an older sister too. She was like, you should paint a rose on it or something. And we ended up like painting a rose on it, or somebody painted a rose on it. I don't even know. And I was like, this thing looks like a chick board. I don't want this stupid thing. I don't even want this thing around here. So I put it on Craigslist for $160. And at 14 years old, I just made $70. Kind of fast. And I'm like, holy crap, this is better than cutting grass for my dad or neighbors. And so and I remember at 14, I tried to get a job at a local bicycle shop. I think I had a flat tire or something, and they wouldn't hire me. And I was all bummed out. So right then I was like, I went back to the factory, and I'm like, I started building. I think I built like maybe like 20 boards, and I was ordering directly from Clark Foam. Clark Foam would ship them to my freaking house. And like, I mean, I think I ordered like a dozen blanks or something, and had my brother and his friends give me money for the blanks. And I remember my mom being like, get all this foam all out of here. Where, you know, and Clark Foam was kind of what got me started, because those blanks were like, all you did was cut the outline. The rocker was there, you know, halfway decent rail. And I specifically remember my 13th board, I was like, my brother and his friends were like, this thing's perfect. This is as good as the ones in the shop. The rails are even. Everything's dead on. And, you know, little kid, that's when the ego starts getting filled. Oh, yeah, we're gonna make some money selling these things. And so at a really young age, I just had this like idea that like, I was like, I'm going to travel around the world from this. I remember like being dead set on it. I was like, that's my goal. I got to get the heck out of here. I want to go to Hawaii. I want to learn to surf bigger waves. You know, I'm going to do better than my older brother's doing, you know? And that's when one summer I ended up, maybe I think I was 15 or 16. It's before I could drive, so I was probably 15. And I got a job at the local factory because they just got FCS. And I was like, dude, you gotta sell me the installation kit. And they're like, look, man, it's kind of hard to figure out. Like, we've never even done this before. It's a whole new thing, these removable fins. And and everyone's like, they suck. They're plastic. They break. Like, you need to learn how to do glass-ons. I was like, dude, the glass-ons are a nightmare. So they hired me that summer as the fin guy to figure out the FCS. So
at 15.
At 15, yeah. And then I was like immediately kind of like, I guess that could be my first job, but I had already been shaping for a little while, and I don't know, I think I did a decent amount of boards that first kind of year. Like I was selling to my buddies, so I was making money.
Were you calling them AJW?
Yeah.
Squarespace is the all-in-one website platform that is designed for entrepreneurs to stand out and succeed online. Whether you're just starting out or managing a growing brand, Squarespace makes it easy to create a beautiful website, engage with your audience, and sell anything from products to content to subscriptions. They have flexible templates with designs for every category, templates that are simple to drag and drop your artwork or logos into, but flexible enough to redesign to your specs. They have online store templates that make it easy to sell physical merchandise, digital or service products like podcast subscriptions and paywalled content. They even make customizable merch. You can design products and they will handle the production, inventory, and the shipping and handling. So let Squarespace handle it for you. They'll save you time, they'll save you money. And will save you money by going to squarespace.com/surf. You get a free trial and you get 10% off your first purchase. Squarespace.com/surf. Enjoy. Were you calling them AJW?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I get my first job at this factory, local factory, Season Surfboards, and they hired me to install fins. And like I said, FCS was like cutting edge when it came out. And it was this whole like, holy crap, the board, well, after you put the plugs, you grind them out, and I'm like, dude, I don't have to worry about the glass-ons because my glass-ons look so terrible for so long. Now my boards look legit, because it was kind of the new thing. It was the technology, So when I switched to removable fins, all of a sudden, and I had been in a factory now, I learned about sanding, learned the whole process.
Yeah.
And those guys were super cool to me, let me do my own boards. And all of a sudden, my brother was in high school. So all of his buddies or the older guys that had cars started picking me up at my house and taking me to the Outer Banks. Because if anyone's been over there, Virginia Beach, the waves really aren't that great.
Seems like there's always waves, but they're not good.
They're just, it's okay.
You could surf most days of the year, but
if you're a surfer in Virginia Beach and you don't learn to surf in the Outer Banks, it'd be like living in San Diego and never going to Mexico. It's like Mexico is just way cooler than San Diego, right?
Yeah.
Well, Outer Banks, North Carolina is definitely one of the better places on the East Coast, and it's about an hour and a half away.
Yep.
But you got to have a car if you don't live there. And my old man had a property in northern Outer Banks in an area that's there's like no roads and there's wild horses on the beach. It's called Corova, North Carolina. So we'd been going every single summer. My whole life I was already going down there anyways, but not on my own to go surfing or try to get blanks and all that stuff. So when my brother got in high school, his friends would get some surfboards. I was making boards for them all, making a little money, had gas money, and all of a sudden, like before I could drive, I had all these older guys picking me up, taking me to Outer Banks every single weekend. So I pretty much every single weekend, every time there were waves, we'd be in the Outer Banks. Amazing. The whole time, And then I ended up meeting, at the time I started shaping for another local, there were a couple other local shapers around there and a couple of surf shops, and they kind of heard that I was looking for, I wanted to shape more. So there was a guy, Robert Camp and Gurney Collins. He had a Hotline Surfboards.
Okay.
So Gurney Collins had a son, Lee Collins. People might know him. He's the commercial fisherman now. Really good fisherman. But he lived down the street. So his dad was a pretty good shaper for a local, East Coast shaper. He could definitely make some nice looking boards. So both those guys were like, hey, you want to shape? Come over to my place. I'll rough it out. You finish it. And I was like, well, don't you want me to rough it out? And then you do the good finishing work? Because you're the guys who are the good shapers and I'm a beginner kind of thing. They're like, no. The rocker's what's all that matters. The rocker, the concaves, that's what matters. The finish doesn't really matter as much. You can figure out how to finish it. So as I started getting better and better, their rough outs started getting rougher and rougher. And I think that was my biggest like learning curve, was just like trying to finish off rough cuts from other guys. And then eventually it was like, kid, you're good enough. Do the whole thing. And then there was another, the factory I was at. And by the way, I started working there. When I started working there, I kept working there the whole time, like that first summer. And then eventually when I turned 16 and I could drive, I end up getting like an old little station wagon, and would, throughout high school, every single day during the week, I was driving to one of these guys' places and building boards. Like full-time job.
Yeah.
In school. So I'm like getting out of school. If there's waves, I'd go surf, or if not, I'd like go to one of these guys' places. And so I kind of like cut my teeth hand shaping a lot of boards for other labels too. And they were doing contract labels for some other surf shops and whatnot, and like would let me do them, but never signed them or nothing.
Yeah.
And so I built quite a few boards at a really young age. So I got really fortunate that those guys all kind of let me.
Absolutely. But to be perfectly honest, they got really fortunate too, because no matter what business you're in, the key thing that you want in an employee is the amount of drive that you had. Like you can't teach that, you know, and somebody can come in with a certain level of talent. That's not as important.
Yeah.
Like somebody who's just going to figure it out the way that you had figured it out.
I just got obsessed with it. Like,
apparently, dude.
I mean, I'm talking like well before I was 18 years old. I was like, I mean, it was never like, oh, you go in there and start sweeping and all that. It was like, hey, and they had orders. They were doing a lot of boards, and they were like, I mean, I remember like they brought in like a bunch of JCs. They had boards from all over the place, shipping over and glassing them there. Rip Curl did like a whole batch of boards over there. Like you'd be surprised. There were like, you know, in quite a few like pretty good shapers would be traveling through. Guys from Hawaii would come over. So like I kind of like started picking up a little bit. I was like a sponge just trying to learn as whatever I could learn.
Yeah.
It was cool, man. And that really set my whole like mindset for the rest of my life, honestly. You know?
So two thoughts in regard to the economics of board building. I hear a lot of people talking about there was just a lot of work back then, like late 90s, early 2000s, there was a lot of boards back then. But there was also, it seemed to be more profitability per unit, per board. So you were a kid, but for like an adult at that time who was that busy, can you guess how much money a professional surfboard shaper was making a year at that point? Were they making $100,000?
I was young, so I didn't even have any concept of like, it was more by the piecework. But I remember guys traveling through and doing 100 boards, you know, like on a trip, you know, and I never really understood that, but I can tell you when I was in high school, there was a surf shop in Jersey that we did a bunch of, it wasn't me at all. It was a contract label thing. And they were like, dude, this kid's kind of doing, you know, they saw that I was putting a lot of effort, trying my best to do a good enough job. And they were like, this kid's kind of doing pretty okay work. And if it's not, we can clean it up. And so in high school, I got a gig ghost shaping for this contract label. I would shape the boards, they would glass them, and then I got really good at remember when Drew Brophy started doing all the Posca pins, and that was like a big people. They were like, hey, we want to do a bunch of that type of stuff. So I had a bunch of tattoo magazines, and I was like, dude, I remember like drawing titties on boards, and my mom's like, what are you doing? You know,
Slater was doing it.
They
like in the magazines.
They paid me. I think I got like $50 a board for artwork.
Crazy.
And I got like, I think it was $45 a board for shaping. So I'm hand shaping these boards in high school. Okay. I was getting $45 a pop. And it was like, at the time, it was like, it's unlimited. Build as many as you can build.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'd be like, okay, I'll do 10 at a time. Be like, all right, I'd hand shape 10 boards. That's $450. Then you take them home and you paint them afterwards. That's another $500. I'm like, 16, 17-year-old kid. I'm like, I remember like there was a screen printing thing there. We started printing t-shirts. I had my own label too. So they were like, we were printing t-shirts, sweatshirts at one point. Like, I mean, kind of funny, but like, I don't know what age I was at this time, but like, you know, you're going to high school parties, right? And I remember somehow, I think through my older brother or something, somehow I got an ID. And so we're going to 7-Eleven. I was like, dude, we can buy beer. Like, I'm 18 years. No, I wasn't even 18. I think I was 16 or something. We're going in here with a fake ID or whatever, my brother's ID or whoever's it was. And we're buying. No, he wasn't even 21 either. Somehow somebody was buying us beer. So we'd be like, go get a case of beer. And I would go to these parties and tell you what, we'll give you free beer, but you got to buy a hooded sweatshirt, $25. And like, I'm talking like we're like little kids hustling like gear. And then I was like, dude, you can order a surfboard? Oh yeah, we'll make you a surfboard too. And like, I was getting orders and boards were costing $95, $100. And you know, even if I sold it at $250, was making $150.
Yeah.
And I was, and at the time doing all of it, start to finish, it was like, what, the guys didn't charge me rent,
Yeah.
And so it was like, it felt lucrative. And then I met probably one of the early big influences I had, which I never thought about it till later in life. I met that guy, Shea Morales, he's Puerto Rican. And I don't know what he was doing over there. Somehow he was shaping there, but he ended up, he left, he went to Hawaii, went to California, and I know he was back shaping for a bunch of the guys in California. I think it was like maybe he worked with John Carper and CI, a couple of these guys, like just one of these guys passing through working or whatever, right? And he came and he passed through one summer and started shaping a bunch of boards at our shop. And I was thinking, man, this guy's pretty fast. I can't believe how fast he is. It takes me this much time. He's shaping boards in, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, start to finish. And they'd have like one big template, and he had a router. That was the big eye-opening, was you have a template, wood template with a router, and everybody else was teaching me to use the handsaw. And I'm like, he's like, yeah, I mean, the handsaw is cool, planers are cool, all these are cool, but like, all these old guys are saying there's all these rules. There's no rules to this. The goal is just finish the product, right? Get the board out of here. And he would route them, and the templates were perfect every time in fucking 5 minutes. I'm like, holy crap, I got to get a router. So I got a router, learn how to do that way, learn how to use sanders, learn how to all this stuff. And he was like, you're good enough. You can go work in any factory anywhere in the world. Like, just go there. They'll hire you. And I'm, no, I'm not good enough. You don't have to be good. They'll teach you what to do. So that was the big light bulb for me. Like, you're telling me I can just buy a plane ticket, go somewhere, and be a worker? And at the time, I remember this specifically, one of the airline companies had an advertisement. It was like around the world trip ticket for like $1,500. And it was like, they used to advertise these. It was like, New York City to Paris to India to Tokyo back to here. And I'm like, I don't want to go to those places. I want to go to like Australia or Hawaii. Well, they didn't have a Hawaii stop, but they had these. And I remember thinking, like, I got to make $1,500, and I'm going to buy one of these damn tickets, and I'm going around the world. I mean, I was, like I said, I think I was 16 or 17. And I mean, I didn't even hang out with people. I just was in my shed working all the time, or working at the factory, or surfing. Those are the only places I would go every single day, weekends, you name it. And I remember thinking, I'm going to go around the world. My brother and I, we were like, we should go on a surf trip. I think my brother, like, he went to like Costa Rica or something, and I'm like, no, man, I'm going, like, I want to figure out how to surf bigger waves. And somehow we got a VHS of that Puerto Underground. Remember that video?
Yeah. Puerto Escondido.
Puerto Underground. Well, I don't know which one it was, the first one or second one. I think it was like, I watched that video.
Todd Morecambe.
Todd Morecambe.
Yep.
I watched that video every day, and I was like, dude, we got to go there. Like, I think it's cheaper than Hawaii. And it was crazy, but like, I remember like I just bought a ticket and went. And like, I can't believe at this time, like my parents, like there was zero parental guardian on this one. There was zero, like they didn't pay for it, nothing. It was like, oh, I got my own money. I'm buying a ticket, and like, I'm going to Mexico,
Did you at least know what time of year to go?
I had to talk to these other shapers, and
good.
like, dude, you need to get a 7.6.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking like, dude, I'm riding small boards. Like nobody rides 7.6s on the East Coast. And I was like, I'm going to shape a 7.6. And I looked up whatever the blank was, the 8.2 freaking Rawson blank or whatever it was. And the rockers were dialed,
Factormeals.com/surf50. Let me tell you, Factor Meals has filled a specific gap in our lives that has simplified our busy schedules and satisfied and nourished us. If you follow me on social media, you know that I love to cook. My wife and I love food and wine, but there are still at least 5 meals a week where we're just underprepared, short on time, and don't want to make a bad dietary decision, nor sacrifice the pleasure that we get out of dining. Factor has solved it. Chef-prepared meals that are delivered to your house weekly. They take 2 minutes to heat up and they're designed to be eaten anywhere. There's no prep, no cooking, and you can recycle the package that it comes in. Delicious meals that are good for you with over 35 options to choose from each week. Go to factormeals.com/surf50. Less expensive than dining out, more delicious, more nutritious. Factormeals.com/surf50.
The rockers were dialed,
Yeah.
you know? So I had this full account with Clark Foam, and I was ordering blanks constantly, getting custom rockers, doing the whole thing. And I was like, dude, Clark Foam would send me the Merry Christmas card. I got the t-shirt in the mail, and I was like, dude, I'm like an official surfboard builder. I got a t-shirt. I'm like, you know, and I never wanted to go to California. That was never a plan. It was more like, no, I need to cut my teeth and go to Puerto. Like, I'm going to make a 7.6 and I'm going to freaking get a 20-footer. I'm like, yeah, like this was the goal. We got to go like Puerto Underground, Con Huevos, you know, like that's the goal. And I'm old shaper, Tony Lightheart was a guy, he helped me out a lot when I had a young age, and he was like, dude, I went to Puerto when I was 25, and we drove there from here. Drove through Texas, through Mexico. It was wild. You can do that. So I went to Puerto, talked to one random friend of mine to go, and it was like me and one guy, and we went to Puerto at a pretty young age for like a month.
Wow.
And I remember getting to the beach, and I had my 7.6, and it was like the first real swell came. It was like May, like prime season. Rains came in. It was like monsooning. I remember getting to the beach, and no joke, it was proper 40-foot faces. Like, and I knew this, and I've never seen waves more than like a foot overhead. And I knew it was that big because I remember all the Mavericks guys, like Skin Dog and all those dudes were down there, and they didn't paddle out. Looking back, it could have been 50 foot. And I remember sitting on the beach with my board. I had my board, my leash. I woke up at sunrise, went down there in the dark kind of thing, and I was going to paddle out, and I was just like, oh my God, this is really, really gnarlier than I ever dreamed of. I'm going to die 100%.
You wouldn't even make the paddle out.
Yeah, I wouldn't even, yeah. And there was one guy out. This was my first trip down. There was one guy out, and I see him way out there, and I'm like on the beach, like all the Mavericks guys were all on the beach sitting on. I'm like, I recognize them from the magazines, and I'm like, you know, I don't even know, 16, 17-year-old kid without my parents in mainland Mexico with some cash I made from building surfboards with my brand new 7.6. I've never seen a 7.6 before, and I'm down here like I'm gonna figure this shit out. But that's the Mavs guys, and they're not paddling out. And there's one dude out there, and it was a gringo. That dude's fucking crazy. Takes off on a bomb. I think 8 shit comes in, and the board washed up right next to me. He had no leash on. So I go get the board. It was like a 9.0 or something. And this is crazy. This is how small world is. I noticed the board was Lynn Shell. And Lynn Shell's a local Outer Banks shaper. And I'm like, that guy is riding like a shaper that I knew about? Holy crap. And this thing's huge. Guy swims in, almost drowned, you know, and the beach was clapping for him. And it was this dude, Will Dillon. I don't know if you're Crazy Will Dillon, they call him.
I don't know.
Will Dillon is one of the gnarliest. Will Dillon, if the people who know Will Dillon, back then, he was one of the gnarliest surfers on the planet. What he did back then, anyone who's spent time in Puerto Escondido, they'll tell you that he was gnarly. He was beyond, he was crazy. And he comes in, oh, thanks for my board, kid, and walks off. And I remember thinking, like, that was so influential to the rest of my surfing little experience of like, wow. That was the craziest, ballsiest thing I've ever seen in my life. And he was riding a local shaper that I know about. Like, I can make these boards. Maybe. And all the Mavericks guys didn't paddle out and watched him, and they were all cheering for him.
Yeah.
And I know, and
And they're all famous.
it was stormy and fucking, it was gnarly rips. They were waiting for the next morning, and the next morning was all cleaned up and they were all catching bombs, Those guys were obviously could have handled it. And they were all like, dude, that's crazy, Will. So later on, he was living down there. I kind of met the guy. And he's like, oh yeah. I was like, what do you do to train? You train a lot? No, I just spearfish. And I'm like, I gotta learn how to spearfish. Like, yeah, I'm talking like years later. Like I obsessed. I started making spear guns. You name it. I've dove into this thing like head first. And then I found out Crazy Will Dillon, who still lives in Puerto, he's originally from Virginia.
Wow.
He's originally from Virginia and then moved to the Outer Banks and was doing construction every year, and then going out to Puerto every summer and come back and did that for however long he did it. But that was like my big light bulb moment again too. That was like, dude, I gotta get out of Virginia.
Yeah.
Nothing against Virginia too much. I've never been a giant. I never had a ton of friends there either. It was more just like the goal originally was we got to move to the Outer Banks. But all the Outer Banks guys gave us a ton of flack because they're like, oh, dude, you're from Virginia, beat it,
Exactly.
And then it was like, screw the Outer Banks. I'm going to Puerto. I got to move to Puerto. So I started going to Puerto every summer for like a month at a time. Made a couple friends there. Ended up becoming friends with those guys. And then there was a guy, Noel Robinson. He's a NorCal guy. He would spend a lot of time down there. And the Long brothers would go and look up to these guys too, because they were older than me, but they weren't like the age of being as successful as these guys back then. And Noel Robinson ended up drowning. Later on, board hit him in the head, but he drowned.
Was that at Puerto?
In Puerto, and it wasn't even that big of a day. But that was super kind of my first connection with death, maybe in surfing, and. Then I think that was like maybe before like the Mark Fu thing. And at the time I remember thinking like, I want to surf big waves, or I want to try to, or I want to shape boards for this. In similar time frame, there was a New York kid, Will Scudin.
Yep.
And I didn't know Will whatsoever, but he was somehow, I heard he went and surfed Mavericks. And I don't know, I think he was like 17 or 16. I don't even know what age, maybe even younger than that. He surfed Mavericks at a pretty young age. And it was just like, whoa. And then the Mark Fu thing happened and Mark Fu drowned. But you got to realize, as an East Coaster kid, there's not waves. You're not surfing all the time. So there's a lot of time like, dude, we grew up on the magazines in the surf movies. It was like, in all my surf movies, we were getting these Puerto Escondido videos. It was like, that's real surfing. Mm-hmm. Like, what we're doing here isn't real surfing. And even the pro surfer, like the competition thing, that wasn't even like that. It was like, whatever, dude. Like, I want to get a barrel, like a big barrel. That was like the big, and we were looking up to like pretty gnarly, guys that were pretty, not as successful at it, but they were doing it.
Yeah.
So my whole original childhood and shaping experience was never about the business. It was always about, dude, I got to figure out how to make a gun or a bigger board so I can one day ride that wave, and it was kind of like, I just want to be able to like surf bigger waves than my brother.
Well, it sounds like it was also about traveling to the spot and having the means to travel. Matt, if you could build boards there, you could reasonably have a reason to go there. And
the Shea Morales, this Puerto Rican guy, he kind of put the seed in my head, like, you can go somewhere and work.
Yeah.
So at some point around then, and I was in high school still, or finishing up high school, I was like,
real quick, that first trip in Puerto, did you ever get a big barrel?
I mean, all it is barrels. I pulled into every single wave as a barrel, but I didn't. Successful, probably not.
Okay, got it. That's a realistic surf experience.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know if you had like some...
Dude, surfing is the most humbling thing, because it's hard. You got to like make your way through the lineup and like meet these guys. It's very, like... You go to surf a spot, you're going to run into the main local guy. You got to like kind of earn your spot. And I'm riding my own boards. I think I would be a lot better surfer. I know for a fact I would be a lot better surfer if I never started shaping surfboards.
Interesting.
That's a humbling one too. Like,
interesting.
Had to swallow that pill. And I definitely I'm working, on always getting better You know, that's like I forced myself to, you know, no matter what, like this morning before here, I gotta go surf. I gotta just keep at it. And as I got better at shaping, I started like, you know, my improving happened. It was kind of a funny little reality I came into later on. I was like, damn. And I remember there was another guy taught me too, was like Ronnie Malott was his name. He was this kind of crazy local guy in and out of jail for different reasons, and he told me, he's like, kid, you're wasting your time shaping boards. And all the old guys would always tell you that you're wasting your time, you're never gonna make any money at this, don't do it. It takes like 100 boards before you even know what you're doing, kid. Don't waste your time. And I'm like, whatever. Like my brother told me my 13th board was perfect. Like he's just salty, you know. And the sad part is it takes 100 boards before you even kind of know how to use the tools.
Yeah.
And then it takes 1,000 boards for you to realize, man, nobody else knows what they're doing either.
Interesting.
And then I think like if you get to like 10,000, then you're like, wow, there's business guys, clever marketing, creativity. It's not about being a good shaper. That's another sad reality, because I was so focused on trying to be the best shaper I could be and make the perfect board. And it's like, it's a business. It's just like anything. You open a restaurant. It's no different. Forget the egos. You can hate on the sellout guys that, you know, mass produce boards. You can hate on the machine shapers. You can hate on these guys, whatever. There's all sorts of weird little competition. But at the end of the day, if you want to keep doing it, you got to make a living.
Yeah.
You got to make money.
Yep.
And that later on led me into the whole like, okay, if I really want to do this, which I was already like super committed. If I really want to do this, I gotta prove in my own mind. I was always my own competition. I gotta prove that I'm good enough to make it where the good guys are at. You know, and to me it was, you know, it was all driven by Surfer and Surfer magazine back then. It was Southern California, Hawaii, Australia, Kira. And then right around then it was like when like Snapper and all that started like coming all out in the media and whatnot. So it was like, I got to go to Snapper Rocks, I got to go to the North Shore, and I got to go to San Diego or Southern Cal, or, you know, whatever. So at that summer, I think I had just finished high school, and I bought a van. Had an old, like, I sold the station wagon. I bought this like Astro van. I put a futon bed in it, and I said, I'm driving cross country.
rocketmoney.com/surf. Just this week, my wife figured out she was paying a subscription for Showtime, but then also paying for Paramount Plus, which includes Showtime for free. That's precisely what Rocket Money was designed for. A modern tool that meticulously tracks the details that we easily get distracted from. It's a finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your monthly spending, and helps you lower your bills. It gives you freedom by helping you see your subscriptions in a simple dashboard and alerts you about hidden fees or increases. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has helped save its members an average of $720 a year, with over $500 million in canceled subscriptions. Stop wasting money on things that you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions by going to rocketmoney.com/surf. Calm the clutter in your head, simplify the tedium of your financial life, and find freedom through rocketmoney.com/surf.
I sold the station wagon. I bought this like Astro van. I put a futon bed in it, and I said, I'm driving cross country. And I didn't know a single person in California at all. And I never wanted to go to California. That was not the dream. It was more like, that's the closest destination I can get to,
right,
where like the big guys are at. So I had met a guy in Puerto who was a high school teacher who was living in San Diego. It was the only connection I had. There was one phone number I had to this guy. And I literally knew 0 people. Like, I mean, and I just got in this van, drove cross country solo. Like, even looking back, it's like my parents were probably dying laughing. Like, what is he doing?
Totally.
You know? I was the youngest of 3, so it was kind of like, whatever.
I suppose so, but I think you also proved that you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Like, they understood, like, hey, he's not going to die. Like,
super driven.
Yeah, exactly.
So I get to California, And I remember, like, you know, across the Mississippi, all this, when I remember specifically, I went to Roswell, New Mexico, because you hear about,
Aliens.
yeah, the aliens. And I was like, I'm going to sleep on the roof of the van in Roswell, New Mexico. And I'm going to freaking, I had this fake ID, and I got a 6-pack of Mickeys. And I remember sitting on the roof of the van, like, all right, if there's ever a chance to see aliens, this is it.
If I drink enough Mickeys, I'll see something.
So I got to California, and I was like, I'm going to Black's Beach. I remember it was the first place I went to go surf. And I was like, okay, cool. It's not that good. I don't know, like, whatever. There's waves. You know, it was fun. I don't know, kind of a long hike just to go surf. It was like chest high, whatever. And I remember thinking, like, I hit up the guy that I met in Puerto. I'm like, hey, man, remember you said hit you up if I was ever out here? Like, is it cool if I crash on your couch? He was living in OB. So he was cool enough. He's like, yeah, I mean, I think maybe had a roommate at the time or something. He's like, you know, it's just, you can crash on the couch for, you know, a couple days or whatever. Ended up, like, definitely overstayed my welcome that first trip. He was like, dude, like, you know, like, you pay, you know, whatever. And I said, don't worry, I'll go sleep in my van. I moved my van to another person's house. Hey, can I use your shower? And after like 2 weeks, I was like, wow, this is like a city. It's like, I don't have any friends. How am I going to get a job? This isn't as easy as I thought it was going to be, you know? So I remember opening the Yellow Book pages, and I was like, okay, what are my number one, what factory do I want to try to get a job at? And I just remember looking on there, and I'm like, where's actually location? I was like, holy crap. Like, I didn't realize, like, you know, San Clemente was all, you know, all those guys there. And I'm like, that's kind of far.
Yeah.
And then, like, Santa Barbara was all those guys, and Santa Cruz, I'm like, Santa Cruz is way too far. I needed something here. Like, this is where this guy's let me park my van. And the closest factory was Sharp Eye Surfboards in Point Loma. So I looked it up, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I think that's those Brazilian guys. And then Rusty, I was like, oh, Rusty's a bigger name. Like, that's where you know, either I got to get in with Rusty or Sharp Eye or one of whoever else is around here, right? And so I remember calling up Sharp Eye, and Marcio Zovi picked up, and he's like, they were renting they had this old shop kind of near the railroad tracks or whatever. And he was a pretty small operation, but he was in a small operation. He was definitely full-blown production, you know, pumping boards out. And I remember going there like, yeah, I'm a surfboard shaper. Do you need help shaping? And they're like, yeah, bring a board. So I brought the best board I had, and it was good, you know, for what it was good enough. And he's like, yeah, fuck, okay, you know what you're doing, cool. Yeah, we don't need a shaper. I need an airbrusher. Okay, I can airbrush. And, you know, I knew how to do artwork, whatever. And so I started out. He's like, you know, put your time in, and maybe you can, you know, if we're busy or whatever. Right now we're not as busy that we don't need any help. But, like, yeah, you can build some of your own boards here too if you want. So, well, I didn't know anybody, but I had all my brother's friends and all my friends back home were like, dude, well, you know, we want to get some boards this summer, but I'm in California, man. Sorry, can't do it. So I was like, maybe I can build a bunch of boards and then drive back and sell them at the end of summer. So I get a job, and it was like, I want to say I was there for 3 days, and there was his airbrusher that was there. His name's Tom Curtis. I don't know if you heard of him, TC. He's like an old school legendary airbrusher, incredible pin liner. I was working. He used to be sponsored by GNS back in the day as like a team rider. He's worked, but he was one of the main guys at Diamond Glasson. And he's like, dude, I hear Diamond might be looking for an airbrusher. Oh, I'm looking for shaping work, man. I don't want to airbrush. I'm not an airbrusher or whatever, but I can do it. And then through the grapevine, Marcio tipped me off. Marcio kind of took me under his wing, and I owe Marcio a lot of credit. He was more like a semi-father figure at the time. Not father figure, but like treated me more like a, you know, adopted kid I got to look out for, right? So he was like, hey, I hear there's a new brand starting up. There's a guy down the street who's got a shop, Stony, and he's going to be building some brand called AKA Surfboards. And I don't even know what year that was. And they need a shaper. I don't know. Go talk to them. So the guy Stoney's like, they're calling me East Coast because I was living in my van. I didn't know anybody. And they're like, hey, East Coast, tell you what. You come in here. The room will be open. You shape 3 boards. before 11 a.m., if they're good enough, you got the job. Okay, there's all hand shaping, right? I never touched a computer shape. And I go in there, and my first day, I'm like, I got to do a good job. I got there, like, in the dark. They had the blanks there. They just said just 3 stock boards, whatever. And I didn't even know the guys I didn't know anything about the brand. I was dealing with the factory manager or the guy who ran the glass shop. So I shaped the boards, did my good enough job. 11 a.m. I thought, okay, finish off, mark the fins. The guy comes over, he's like, okay, kid, shoot, you can shape. You got the job. Come in tomorrow. We're going to do, you can do 3 a day. If you can do 3 a day, you got the job. Hand shaping 3 a day. Good shapers were doing them in like 45 minutes to an hour, which was fast. I think I was taking me like 2 hours at the time. So I'm like, I was trying to do a perfect job. So I was like, okay, I need 6 hours. So I got to get in here at like 5 or whatever it was. And the second day I got in super early, did my 3 boards, got paid. It was the same thing, like $45 a board. I'm like, dude, I'm in San Diego making $130 a day by 11 a.m.
Yeah.
This is awesome. Then I went to Sharp Eye, do a couple rail airbrushes, whatever. And then the next day, or they're like, oh, come by next week. We got to get blanks. Because, blanks run out, and that's the thing you don't really think about. And then something happened, my van broke down or something. I didn't have a car at the moment, and I didn't have my tools were all in the van. And so I was like, look, I can't make it into work because I can't get, my tools are all, and he's like, dude, just get a ride, get in there. There's tools in there. Okay. And meanwhile, I go to Sharp Eye first. I think I had a little locker or something. I put my shoes, got my mask, a couple things. They were letting me leave some things there. And I walked down the street to this guy, Stoney's. And meanwhile, TC was the guy I was kind of like talking to, who's kind of one of my only friends, honestly. But I had just gotten here. And I go in the shaping room, and I'm a little late. And Stoney's like, look, dude, there's a planer in there. There's tools in there. Just use whatever's in there. Get the boards done. But get out of there by 11. What's this rush for 11? Well, it's just another shaper's room. So, he comes in at 11. He's going to be pissed if you're in there. I'm like, okay, well, I'll try my best. Maybe I can only do 1 or 2 today. So I start. I'm in there. And I'm telling you, I'm 17 years old. And I'm in here and don't know anybody. And I'm hand shaping these boards. And I'm getting paid. I'm all excited. This is my dream situation. And it was 7 a.m. The door bursts open. And there's this old, long hair, guy's got no shirt on, just got done surfing the cliffs or whatever. And he comes in, he's like, who the fuck are you? And are you using my planer? And I have no idea who this guy is. I'd never seen him in my life. Don't know anything about names, about local people here. And he just shoves me against the wall, grips the planer out of my hand. He's like, are you that East Coast kid here? Boy, you're lucky. I ought to whoop your ass right now. Get the fuck out of here. And he just lights me up. And I'm like, look, man, I just got a job here. This is Stoney. He's like, Stoney hired you? He's going to, what are you're my replacement? I'm like, I don't need this. And all of a sudden, somebody comes in, something happens. And I don't know, he was having a bad morning.
Apparently.
And he ends up lighting me up and basically straight up wants to fight me. And I'm like, who is this guy? And the glassers all come out. Everybody's at the shop comes out. And they're all friends with him. And they're like, oh, dude, he's going to get his ass whooped. And it's funny. I've never really told this story too much. I don't want to name drop too much, but it's worth sorry. It's John Holly. He's an old school Sunset Cliffs guy. He's gnarly. And I'm like, no disrespect to you, but I'm not fighting you, man. It's 7 a.m. I just here working, man. I didn't know these are your tools. The guy told me to use them. I'm out of here, man. And he's like, he was fully just in my face, shoved me against the wall. Look, kid, you're lucky I don't whoop your ass right now. You don't ever touch somebody else's tools. You don't ever fucking come into somebody else's room unless you know who it is. It's ridiculous that they even allowed you in here. You better not be copying my templates and, the whole thing. So people, and I was like, damn, this is rough out here. Yeah. You know what? I don't need this. So I walked back to Sharp Eye. I'm on the alleyway or whatever, kind of the news kind of go around and they're like, dude, heard old man Allie almost whooped your ass. Like, everyone's joking me, and I'm like, fuck, man, like, I don't have any friends here. This is fucking bullshit. Like, you won't even let me shape. You got me airbrushing, and these other guys try to beat me up. I finally got a job shaping. They said it was good enough. And TC was like, look, man, this thing isn't going to end. Like, you got to, like, put your time in, man. It just is what it is. But I told you, Diamond's looking for an airbrusher. He said, call him up. The owner's name is Bob Bocci. So he gives me his number. I call it Bob Bocci and said, hey, man, I hear you guys looking for airbrush. He's like, can you do it? And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm the airbrusher over at Sharp Eye, which was not a lie, but for like a week.
Right.
So he goes, killer, come on over, kid. You got the job. I got this other airbrusher who's a nightmare I'm dealing with right now, who's actually, I've turned to really good friends. Myers, Jeffrey Myers is his name. He's just another one of the best airbrushers around this kind of area, in my opinion. He's like, he goes and surfs all the time. He barely does what I ask him to do, and I'm hiring you to start a fire under his butt. I'm like, great. I'm like, just like pissing people off kind of thing. And I'm just trying to survive at this point. I'm living in my van. Okay. And so I go over to Diamond, I get the job airbrushing. They're like, look, dude, you're good enough, but like, you're really slow. Like, we need to be doing some numbers here. Like, you need to be able to airbrush 20 boards in a day. I'm like, dude, I can't, I'm a shaper, not an airbrusher. Yeah, whatever, kid. So finally, the Myers guy, Jeff Myers, is a good friend of mine. He's a super classic guy, but he's like, look, kid, you know, there's unlimited boards here. And right then was when Bill Johnson just won the world title. Okay. So Bill Johnson.
With CJ?
With CJ. But he was right for under Rusty, but they were in the building next door, which was all the in-house shapers, right? Which was Bill Johnson, Rick Hammond, Terry Goldsmith, all those guys, and Rusty. And I'm at Diamond, which is the glass shop. And I'm just getting there, right? And I'm like, whoa, this place is cool. They had all the boards, and I remember they were doing a bunch of toe boards for Flea, because they sponsored Flea back in the day.
That's right. I forgot about that.
So I had this influence of like the Mavericks guys are the real deal guys. So I'm in here airbrushing all their guns and their toe boards. And I was like, just, you know, fascinated by it. Just like, dude, I've never seen a toe board in my life. And this was when like Flea was in his peak or prime. I was like, dude, I got to go to Mavericks one day and check that out. Like, that was like where my mindset was at. And I was like, how am I going to pull this off, man? I'm not fast enough to be an airbrusher. They're going to fire me. I just don't want to get fired. And I just want to get enough respect to be able to work here. Right. And that was like always the goal. And I kind of like never worried about my own brand at the time. It was more just, so then they were like, look, kid, you really want to shape some boards? You can shape your own brand on the weekends. And then Myers actually gave me a key and the alarm code to the factory. Okay. Which I was not, he should not have done that to me. So I started parking my van in the back, sleeping there. If totally like without really permission.
Yeah.
A couple of the laminators came in. There was a guy, Knuckles. There was a couple of these guys who were like all pretty legendary San Diego board builders. And they're like, dude, you know, like, this kid's cool. He's sleeping in his van. Just goes surfs blacks all day and comes in here and works. And one of the guys saw a couple of my first boards and they're like, holy crap, like, you actually can kind of shape? Like, dude, like, show the guys that you can shape. Like, screw airbrushing. You're way too slow at airbrushing anyways. I'm like, I'm not good enough to be shaping for you guys. I know my place now. I almost got beat up by Holly down the street. And they're like, wait, what?
We heard about that.
They're like, what? Holly? And I'm like, I don't even know the guy. I don't know. Just ran into this guy. He was having a bad day. He wanted to fight me. I was using his planer. And they're like, whoa, what? I'm like, oh, dude, you know Holly works here too. Oh, no. And I'm like, you know Holly's brother-in-law's with the owner, Bob Bocci? They're brothers. I'm like, I'm going to get fired here too. I got to start going back to Sharp Eye and being friends with those guys because I'm definitely getting fired here. I'm not trying to get beat up by this guy at the time. And so meanwhile, I'm like I'm not telling anybody about this anymore. I'm not bringing this up. I'm going to get fired everywhere I go. And so all the guys just thought it was hilarious. And they I feel like they were looking out for me because of that. And then there was another there's a guy, Bob Yinger. I don't know if you've heard of Bob Yinger. So Bob Yinger was shaping there at the time too, or had just left and moved back to the East Coast. So the shaping room that I was using was Yinger's old room, which at the time I had never met him. He's a Florida guy. He ended up moving to the Outer Banks and became one of the main shapers at Wave Riding Vehicles.
Yeah.
So now, years later, we were actually really close friends and a lot of funny stories. But like, he was out shaping, and I remember like, you just as a little kid, you have these envisions and you put everybody on these pedestals. Well, still to me, it was like, that's just another East Coast shaper. The big dogs is like Rusty and them. In the in-house guys, those are the guys that like I gotta still learn, and even Marcio at the time, like I don't know, he wasn't, he was still just trying to make a living and run a business, and he definitely didn't have the clout that he has now. And Rusty and them were definitely like the biggest guys in San Diego. So my goal back then was still I'm just trying to learn how to do it, and then it was like I was just trying to learn how to I knew how to shape. I had been shaping for, not that long, but in my life, it was the only job I've ever done. So I just wanted to get enough respect from the other board builders to know hey, this kid can kind of, belongs here a little bit, So I'm putting my time in, just waiting the day that Holly shows up to beat me up or I get fired. And right around then, Bill Johnson won the title with CJ and bailed, and he started his own brand. And Hobgood ended up jumping ship with and followed Bill Johnson. So that summer, they just won the world title, so they were cranking. They were cranking a lot of boards. And I remember Bob Ochikamp was like, dude, they need help shaping. Do you know how to do computer shapes? I don't know. I'm sure I could learn if they teach me, but do they really want to teach me? Probably not. And he's like, look, let me just bring one over here, get a bad cut, finish it off the best you can, and we'll see what they say. And back then I was like, when I thought finishing good it was the actual finish. So I had wet and dry sandpaper on the rails. I mean, I didn't know what level they were talking about. So I took all weekend. I had the whole thing was you could have done the best tint job ever on this thing. String was perfect. Nose and tail were perfect. Everything was as good as I could do it. And took it over and they're like, Jesus, kid, you don't need to finish it this tight, but your rails are even, everything's done. It's not real. It's not our rail. You need to learn how to do our rail and our things. But, so he takes me, introduces me to Rusty, and Rusty's like, look, man, we just need help at the moment. We'll give you some work, but Rick Hammond needs to oversee all of them. Rick Hammond was kind of like, oh, great. Looking back, they probably, paid him a little bit to oversee or whatever.
Sure.
I didn't know that at the time, so I thought it was just being another nuisance to somebody else.
Yeah. I'm just going to turn this slightly. Okay.
All good. So that was kind of my whole, initial start in, the actual, I guess you could say, seeing the bigger picture of production, right? Real production. And I think that first summer I did 100 boards with them, okay? And Rick Hammond kind of, not that he coached me, but he touched up my imperfections or things that were wrong. I needed to learn tuck better, needed to learn this, that, and the other, and would, would kind of go over each one for me, and I really appreciated that a lot. And Rick Hammond actually kind of was someone that definitely didn't, 100% I wouldn't consider him a mentor whatsoever. He was just a guy that I was able to watch a little bit, right? So I go back to Sharp Eye and I say, dude, I'm at Diamond I'm shaping Rusties. He's like, really? Well, fuck. We need some help too. So he had a little side brand called Bunker. It was a surf shop. He's like, you can do the bunker boards. And I'm like, I don't want to do bunker boards, dude. And I'm making money. I'm making money over Diamond. I'm making whatever it was. I'd airbrush in the mornings. I'd shape a little bit in the afternoons, doing some of my own boards. And the whole time I'm building my own brand. And Clark Foam had not gone out of business yet. It was ended up being that shortly afterwards. So he let me do that, and then occasionally, and then they got busy, and it was like, okay, cool, kid, you can shape here, do some boards, airbrush some boards. So that by the end of that summer, I was shaping and airbrushing at both Diamond and Sharp Eye.
Wow.
And calling my older brother back. Dude, you got to get your buddies to get boards. Like, I know what I'm doing now, you know? So that summer I had go back, or the end of the summer I was going to go back, and I ended up like filling up my van with like, just loaded it with blanks. I think I had like 45 boards I made. And I had my brother and them or friends, you know, ordering and sending me some money. And I went back. I'm like, I'm broke as crap. I got to sell these boards. So the first thing I did that year was I did a whole road trip. I left I visited home for a second, and then I drove to up north, Maryland, New Jersey, New York. And I like started getting went to surf shops, you know, and I remember getting in my first couple accounts. Got an account down in, my older brother by then he moved to Southern North Carolina. So I moved down there that year. And then my old man was like, look, man, surfboards ain't going to work out for you probably. You know, you should probably go to college. You know, and I'm like, dude, I'm already doing it. Like, you don't realize, like, they didn't know anything about it.
Of course, yeah.
And I was like, I'm already in with I spent a whole summer cutting my teeth. Like, I almost got beat up this old guy. I met these other guys. Like, I'm in with in San Diego. Like, I'm in with some of the real deal board builders, and like they're my only friends. So I was like, I'm not going to college. No way in heck. I'm going back out there. Well, I go back to California.
Did you sell all those boards?
Yes, I ended up hustling them all, and you know, had my first experience in sales, which is hard. That's also when the whole surf tech things first started kind of coming out, and those guys were all doing consignment. So that was like the first Asia import thing was around that time, and it was tough because it was like all the big shops were like, dude, kid, you got no label, nobody knows you got to freaking do consignment. I'm like, I can't afford to do consignment. You have to pay for them. So then it was like they're lowballing me, and I'm getting lowballed and all of this. But I would always get paid. But it'd be like, okay, this shop paid me this price. This shop paid me this price. And then
Did you walk out with a check, or was it 30 days?
No, it was a check. It was a check. And I think the guys realize it's some kid trying to freaking make it, you know. But that was a big learning curve on and a lot of people want to discuss surfboards as like a business. Oh, board builders don't make any money, this and the other. And I quickly learned, no, the actual guy is actually doing the hands-on work. Especially back then too, I was it's a job. That's all it is. It's a job. And you can make money. You know, are you going to get rich? Heck no. But then I'm looking at Rusty and these guys. And I'm like, I don't know. He seems like he's doing pretty well. But he also went through the 80s and the early 90s and bought real estate in La Jolla, California. And, you know, I didn't really realize the whole real estate game. But I just thought it was all surfboards or t-shirts or whatever. I'm like, I don't know. Everyone I know is kind of doing pretty good, better than my friends back home.
Well, so back to Gary Linden's original point, it was when times are good and you have some capital to use, don't necessarily reinvest it into the business, but if you could buy that real estate. Or Rusty, I mean, I don't even know if his profits came from the boards themselves or if it was from clothing, more likely.
Definitely back then.
So Linden was still right. And those other guys who are telling you along the way, there's no way to do it, no way to make a living doing it, they were right in a sense too. Or the point that they were trying to make to you was still salient. You know, you can get cash flow from this, but use that to do something else.
I didn't realize any of this for probably another, honestly, 20 years later, you know? And I still, at this point, I was thinking in my head, I don't care about being in California. And you know what's really funny is when you're on the East Coast, as a young surfer, there's this whole thing of I had a bunch of friends trying to be pro surfers or whatever, and they're like, oh, it's just the guys in California all get sponsored so easily. They're doing this. Right. There's this whole West Coast versus East Coast mentality, especially in Florida. And when I get to California, I'm like, I don't know, no one gives a crap about me. I'm in a city. I'm in this big place. There's traffic and there's all this. And dude, nobody gives a crap about me. No one gives a crap about where I'm from. Nobody gives a crap whatever. And then I was kind of thinking, I kind of got to get out of here too. This isn't the destination. The goal was always the journey of it, right? And so that when so eventually a big other major kind of turning point for me was Clark Foam went out of business. And Clark Foam literally, I'm one of those era of kids that literally my early success was 100% because of Clark Foam. Clark Foam's blanks were freaking done. You know, like that 6-1R, you could glass it and it would ride. Okay. 100%. I'm sure I know some guys have done it.
Yeah.
So I was a byproduct of Clark Foam, like of the close tolerance blanks and all the work that guys like Rawson and Rusty and all them did originally with them. And here I am a few years later now, kind of, you know, not rubbing elbows with, but like I'm in the same vicinity as these guys that I totally idolized, you know? And even down to the finish, you know, the guy wiping the dolphin skin on the boards. I'm like, what is this? Learning all that, the floor acrylics, just the finish, how to build a professional product. And that is the hardest thing to learn in boards. Nowadays you got the internet. I mean, the YouTube is unbelievable. You know, and it is what it is, you know, no disrespect to any of the guys who make all the videos and all that. But back then it was like, I remember when Shaping 101 came out with John Carper, and I remember checking that out and like, whoa, like he's giving away all the secrets, you know?
I feel like that would have came out before.
Yeah. I didn't get it. When it came out, I was, maybe I never saw it till later though.
Because when you said you went to the library to find that book, I was thinking that video probably already existed.
It didn't.
Okay.
Not then.
Okay.
Maybe it'd be interesting. I have to look into that.
Like 97, I feel like, is around the time that video came out.
So then it just probably wasn't in the library.
Yeah. That was my thought, is it existed, but not in your world, you know? Yeah. We need to make a production decision right now.
Okay.
We've got 3 hours left of conversation that we can have.
Of course.
And it's 1:30, and I want to honor my other obligations.
Of course.
Can we make this a two-parter?
Totally.
Now's a great time to kind of hit the pause button, and I'll come back within a week. Are you going to be around for a week?
No, I did. Yeah, no problem.
And let's go from there.
Let's get past the Clark Foam phase.
Okay.
Because my whole goal, I've made a couple notes to myself. My whole goal was I wanted to discuss traveling, and this is all leading up to.
I know.
Unfortunately, I could talk too much. What do we got? 30 minutes?
I mean,
not even.
It's 1:30. I want to be on the road by 2.
Give me 10 more minutes, 15 more minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. And then cut it off. Okay. Go. All right. Do we just start?
Yeah.
Oh.
I'll edit it all together.
So I was ultimately a byproduct of those early close tolerance blanks, because the rocker hand shaping really was not that difficult once you have done your couple hundred boards, right? So the rockers were all there. It was like, get your templates dialed, get your rail somewhat close, get your concaves in there, and then the rest of it is, you know, glass job, sand job, all that stuff. So when Clark Foam went out of business, that was I couldn't get blanks. I was a nobody, right? So that first year, and maybe it was right before that, but everything started shutting down and no one could get foam, and I didn't know where I was going to go. And all the guys at Diamond Glass and who I'd been looking up to were like, look, kid, you got an opportunity to go back to school. Get the heck out of surfboards. You're just going to be a loser at the end, and you're never going to make it. You're going to be like us, salty and angry. This is your chance to get out, man. Just get out, go to school, whatever. And I'm like, these are the guys I look up to. And they're like, trust me, man, the work, it comes and goes. It's a freaking feast or famine business. So that was my first learning of that. And I went into that summer or whatever that year, and I remember sit down in the office with Rusty. And by the way, I had been working with Marcio a lot too. And Marcio was giving me a lot of good advice too, just in life, you know. And Rusty was like, well, look, man, you know, when I was young, you probably made a little money this summer, didn't you? What are you doing with your money? Yeah, I don't know, just stashed away in my van. I got like a little safe locked in there. I wasn't paying rent. I was making like $200 a day every day of the week. And I'm like, I had a wad of cash. He's like, I hear the guys in Australia got blanks and they need work. So he's like, I'll connect you with this guy, Rusty Australia. I remember telling Sharp Eye, I was like, dude, I'm going to Australia and I'm going to work for Rusty. That was my trip. I can be, if I do that, I can come back and I can be an in-house guy. You know, that was like my little plan that summer at least. And so he gave me the phone numbers to those guys. Turns out they were in Margaret River. It was in West Australia at the time. I had a buddy who was doing a study abroad in Perth, like a really close friend of mine. And I'm like, I'm going to Australia. I got the money. I'm buying the ticket. I bought one-way tickets. I got a one-way ticket. I'm going to go to the Gold Coast first. And I like had a friend of a friend. I went to Kira. I got Kira super good. I made a channel bottom board. I surfed. I took a bus from Kira down to the Gold Coast to Byron Bay, all the way back to Sydney. And long story short, I always wanted to travel, and that was always the goal. So it was like, I just got to get the next job to travel. So I was living my childhood dream already. And I bought a ticket to West Oz. I get to Perth. My buddy has this ute they call them, and it was like some station wagon. I was like, we just got to put a mattress in the back, and we can live rent free. So I did this for 3 months. And it's like, at some point, I got to get to Margaret River, and I got a job when I run out of money. Rusty Preisendorfer is going to hook me up. He talked to the guy for me. I'm like, just an idiot. We go to Narlu, all the Northwest, camped out, scored Red Bluff, all these waves, and was like, holy crap, this is like Bunyip dreaming, And so then we make our way back down to Margaret River, surfed the box, surfed all these spots, went all the way far south. There was like a shark attack, and like did the whole, got to experience all this stuff. And now I'm going broke. I contacted the Rusty Australia, and they're like, yeah, mate, hey, I remember that was like months ago. Rusty called. What took you so long? Just surfing. And yeah, you can get it. We can put you to work. But yeah, we relocated. We're in Sydney.
Yep.
Fuck. I'm broke. I got no money. So I went to a local grape farm trying to get a job picking grapes just to I was that broke. And I couldn't call my parents for help. It was just too embarrassing. They were already saying I'm an idiot. So I'm like at this farm trying to pick grapes, and like, look, kid, you don't have a work visa. We can't hire you. Huh? Like, just under the table, right? No, we're not going to do this. Is a professional business. I'm out of money. I can't go make it to Sydney. So I ended up going to Sydney. Actually, I ended up making it over there, and I did end up. There was a couple QSs in Australia at the time, and I had a couple connections, and I started making some boards with, at the time, this is kind of mixing the years up a little bit, but I started making some boards for Ben Bourgeois and a couple guys.
Yep.
I did like one board, and he liked it, and so I had the connection. Let me make you a board in Australia. So at the time, I like went to a local factory, this guy Mick Button in Sydney, and did a couple boards for like Ben Bourgeois, Gabe Kling at the time. There's another guy, Asher Nolan, a bunch of East Coaster guys that were on the tour.
Yeah.
And that was like my big, like, okay, I'm doing it,
Were they writing Xanadu's?
They were getting boards from a bunch of guys,
Okay.
and they were picking up boards in Australia too.
Gotcha.
But Ben Bourgeois had a surf shop in Wilmington, North Carolina. His
Right.
dad ran. So
Right.
that was like, okay, if I can get them riding boards, maybe the surf shop will carry my brand. And eventually it did. But that initial trip, I blew through all the money I made. And then I'm running at him. I have no money. I'm like, I have to go home. I'm out. I got to go back to my parents. Like I'm broke. I've been living in my van for like a year and a half now. I got no money. I'm a bum. I'm a surf bum. But I've now like kind of like learned the basic skills on how to build surfboards. I learned how the business works, and I'm gonna move back into my brother's house, which was, and my old man was like, look, we'll help you out with if you go back to school. We'll help you out with the school thing, but you got to finish it, and you can't just keep bailing and doing the surfboard gig because it's not gonna work out.
Yeah.
And it was like my whole dream of like, I got to prove them wrong.
Right.
And on my way home, I'm like all sad thinking like I failed. I did this great trip, but I kind of failed because I went through all my money. And I looked at my layover ticket, and it was in Fiji. I didn't even see it yet. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I had pre-bought the tickets like 3 months before, after I had got there. And then I was like, I'm out of money. I'm going to Fiji. I'm getting off the plane. There's no way I'm not going to surf Cloud Break in these places, because back then you couldn't surf Cloud Break, but you could on weekends.
Oh,
I wasn't staying at Tavarua, obviously,
Right.
but
On the weekends, the government made them open it up to tourists.
I contacted a friend in Australia who was in Australia. The guy was staying. I said, dude, you gotta lend me some money. I'm good for it. I'll pay you back. He goes, bro, I got $300. So he sent me he gave me $300. And I'm like, I don't know how that feels like a wire transfer or something back then, but somehow I got it in my bank account. I didn't tell my parents I was broke. I didn't even tell them I was coming back right then. And I get off the plane with $300 in my boards, and I walk off the airport in Fiji solo. And I'm like, I gotta figure out how to get to Cloudbreak with $300. I found a hostel in Nandi. It's like $4 a night. It was super ghetto, like 20 dudes in one room. It was terrible. Had like the worst night of sleep of my life. And I met a cab driver who was like, hey, I got a guy. He runs boats out there. Maybe if you just give him gas, give him the $300 for gas money.
300.
He'll take you out there. And so I was like, look, how many days will $300 get me? He's like, you give me $300, I'll let you jump on the boat for a week. Each day I'll take you out. Because he was like, on weekends I got to go pick up the guests, the paying guests. And he's like, I got a brother who's got a hammock you can sleep in.
Wow.
So I literally was like sleeping in a hammock, gave him the $300, had no money for food, no money for nothing. Met a local fisherman guy. He took me out hand lining, caught some Jarali, and was like, this was like the big end of my hurrah in my mind. This is the around the world trip, not around the world, but like I made it to freaking Oz. I'm in Fiji. I'm going home broke. I did it.
Yeah.
Kind of,
Yeah.
And I guess, Surfboards isn't going to work out.
Wow.
And that was like my quitting phase,
Yeah.
Now I'm like, I don't know, maybe 19 years old. And I go home, and the guy took me. The funniest thing is I really want to go to Cloudbreak, and he takes me on the weekend. He takes me to he's like, we got to stop at Tavarua though, because I got to get the guests, and you got to sign off your name to go surf Cloudbreak, and then they'll take you out. And at the time, I've been in West Oz, sleeping in cars, fucking doing all this like kind of hardcore stuff, getting worked on reef break, all this stuff. I get there, and there's just like some SoCal bro guy with tattoos. Here I'm in Fiji hanging out with the local guys. And he's like, hey, bro, you can't leave this plappa. Sit here. We're going to get you a guest list. I'm pretty sure it was Derek Dunphy, a young Derek Dunphy.
Oh, yeah.
He's a skinny guy. I had no idea who he was.
Yeah.
It's funny. I'm friends with him now, actually, years later. But he was like fully like, SoCal cool guy, which is what I couldn't stand at the time. I'm like, dude, you know what? It's like head high out there. I don't even want to surf there. Screw you guys. I'm going spearfishing. So I ended up like somehow, I don't know what I was thinking, but the local guy had a spear, like a pole spear or something. And I went and we'd spearfished like inside of all of that. I don't even know if that was even allowed or not, or who knows. And then ended up like, it's like, I needed food.
Yeah.
And we like spearfish and I think he got lobster and took it back to the hammock and ended up like cooking up fish and stuff. And was just like, dude, this is it. Like, this is the travel nomad. Went back home to the East Coast, broke as a joke, moved in with my brother. And I was just kind of like, felt like a little bit of okay, that was a good hurrah. I guess I got to get a real job now.
Wow.
And then I went to school, and I went to school in North Carolina, Southern North Carolina, and ended up meeting the local factory. And the whole time started building boards again.
Well,
we'll end it there.
Pause it there. And to be continued. That's a perfect cliffhanger anyways.
Traveling was definitely the goal, and that was the only goal. Traveling and surfing. And the surfboards, it was a time period where like it did pay for it all. And it did make okay money. And I still think any business you do, it's all about just, you got to be, it's like running a restaurant. It ain't going to be easy, but you got to run a tight ship,
Yeah. Okay. To be continued.
No, appreciate it.
Surf Splendor.